Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the Pacific Ocean as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. My reflection stared back at me. Riker Cade, neurosurgeon extraordinaire, a titan in my field. Yet here I was, alone in this sprawling mansion perched atop the cliffs. The vast emptiness of the grand dining room behind me mirrored the void within. I turned, surveying the meticulously set table for two. Crystal glasses sparkled in the fading light, flanking fine china plates atop and crisp white tablecloth. Everything was perfect, as always. I made my way to the wine cellar, footsteps echoing in the silence. Row upon row of bottles greeted me, each vintage carefully catalogued and stored at the ideal temperature. My fingers trailed along the labels until I found what I was looking for: a 1945 Romani Conti. As I grasped the bottle, memories flooded back. Serafina and I on our honeymoon in France, touring vineyards hand in hand, her emerald eyes sparkling as she laughed, dark curls dancing in the breeze. The way she looked at me then, like I was her whole world. I pushed the thoughts aside. That Serafina was long gone, replaced by a stranger who shared my home but not my life. Back in the dining room, I uncorked the wine with practiced ease. The rich aroma filled the air as I poured two glasses, one for me, one for her whenever she decided to grace me with her presence. A glint on the hardwood floor caught my eye. I crouched down, reaching under an armchair to retrieve a delicate diamond earring. Frowning, I turned it over in my palm. This wasn't Serafina's style at all, and our housekeeper would never be so careless as to lose jewelry here. For a moment, suspicion flared, but I quickly extinguished it. There had to be a logical explanation. Perhaps Serafina had hosted one of her art world acquaintances for tea. Yes, that must be it. I pocketed the earring to return to her later. The grandfather clock in the foyer chimed 8. Still no sign of my wife. I sighed, lifting my wineglass in a solitary toast. To another evening alone, I murmured. My phone buzzed, interrupting the silence. An unknown number. Curious, I opened the message. Check the security footage. You deserve to know. I froze, wineglass halfway to my lips. Security footage? How did this person know about the hidden cameras I'd installed throughout the house? A chill ran down my spine. No, this had to be some kind of prank. I deleted the message, determinedly pushing away the seed of doubt it had planted. Serafina's key scraped in the lock. I smoothed my features into a neutral expression as the front door opened. Riker, her melodic voice called out. I'm home, darling. I stepped into the foyer, taking in the sight of my wife. She was stunning as always in a form-fitting black dress, her dark hair swept up elegantly. But there was something off about her smile, a tightness around her eyes. Welcome home, I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She smelled of unfamiliar cologne. I was beginning to worry. Serafina laughed, the sound brittle. Oh, you know how these charity events drag on. I'm famished. Is dinner ready? I nodded, gesturing toward the dining room. Everything's prepared. I opened that 45 Romani Conti we've been saving. Her eyes widened slightly. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to spoil my wife? I kept my tone light, watching her closely. Serafina's laugh was more genuine this time. I suppose not. Let me just freshen up and I'll join you. As she climbed the stairs, I returned to the dining room. My fingers brushed the outline of the earring in my pocket. A flicker of unease passed through me, but I pushed it aside. This was to be a pleasant evening with my wife. Nothing more, nothing less. I raised my glass, rehearsing the toast I'd prepared. To us, my dear. To love that grows stronger with each passing year. The words rang hollow in the empty room. Hours later, I sat alone in my study, nursing a glass of scotch. Serafina had retired early, claiming a headache. The evening had been stilted, conversation forced. We were two strangers sharing a meal, going through the motions of a marriage long dead. My phone sat on the desk before me. That cryptic message burned into my mind. Check the security footage. You deserve to know. I drained my glass, steeling myself. With a few taps, I accessed the hidden camera feed. At first, all seemed normal. Serafina entering the house, removing her coat, pouring herself a glass of wine. Then my blood ran cold. She wasn't alone. Two men entered behind her: Alistair Thorne, my supposed colleague, and Jackson Graves, Seraphina's personal trainer. I watched in growing horror as Seraphina embraced them both, her actions far too intimate for mere friendship. What unfolded next made bile rise in my throat. My wife, the woman I'd loved for over a decade, lost in passion with these men. Their hands roamed her body as she laughed, a carefree, joyous sound I hadn't heard from her in years. God, I needed that, Seraphina purred on screen, stretching languidly. Riker's been insufferable lately, always hovering and asking questions. Alistair chuckled, nuzzling her neck. The great Dr. Cade, reduced to a nagging housewife. If only his adoring patients could see him now. Please, Jackson scoffed. As if that cold fish could satisfy a woman like you, Sarah. Leave him. Come away with me. Seraphina's laughter was cruel. Oh, Jackson, you sweet boy. Why would I leave when I have the best of both worlds? Riker's money and reputation, and you two to keep me entertained. I slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch more. Rage coursed through me, icy and absolute. How long had this been going on? How many times had they made a fool of me in my own home? My mind raced, cataloging every suspicious late night, every flimsy excuse. God, I'd been so blind, so trusting. No more. With trembling fingers, I dialed a familiar number. It rang twice before a clipped female voice answered. Riker? It's past midnight. What's wrong? Mallory, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. I need your help. It's time to make Seraphina pay. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. I've been waiting years to hear you say that. What did the bitch do this time? I outlined what I'd seen, my words clipped and cold. Mallory listened in silence, only speaking when I'd finished. Oh, Riker, she breathed, a note of something like hunger in her voice. We're going to destroy her. Tell me what you need. For the next hour, we plotted. By the time I hung up, a plan was in motion. Seraphina would lose everything: her money, her reputation, her very freedom. And Alistair and Jackson? They would rue the day they ever laid eyes on my wife. I poured another scotch, raising the glass in a mocking toast to the family photos lining my desk. To love, I sneered. May it burn everything it touches. Morning light streamed through the windows as I prepared breakfast, the picture of domestic tranquility. Inside, I seethed with barely contained rage. But outwardly, I was calm, collected. The mask I'd perfected over years of marriage to a woman who no longer loved me. Seraphina breezed into the kitchen, already dressed for the day in a tailored pantsuit. She pecked my cheek absently, reaching for the coffee pot. You're up early, I commented mildly, sliding a plate of eggs and toast across the counter. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Busy day ahead. That charity event last night has given me some new ideas for the gallery. Ah yes, the charity event. I took a sip of my own coffee, watching her over the rim of the mug. How did that go? You got in rather late. A flicker of unease passed over Seraphina's face, quickly masked. Oh, you know how these things are. Lots of networking, schmoozing potential donors. I lost track of time. I hummed noncommittally. I see. And did Alistair and Jackson enjoy the event as well? The color drained from Seraphina's face. She set down her coffee cup with a shaking hand. What are you talking about? I smiled, all teeth and no warmth. Come now, darling. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? I saw the security footage. For a moment, Seraphina looked like a deer in headlights. Then her expression hardened, green eyes flashing with defiance. You bastard, she hissed. You've been spying on me? I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. Spying? In my own home? I'd say I have every right to know what goes on under my roof. Or should I say, who goes on? Seraphina's face contorted with rage. She launched into a tirade, her words designed to wound. What did you expect? She spat. You're never here, always at the hospital or locked away in your study. Do you have any idea how lonely I've been? How starved for affection? I regarded her coolly. And that justifies betraying our marriage vows? Throwing yourself at other men? As if you care about our vows. Serafina's voice rose to a shriek. You've never loved me, Riker. Not really. I'm just another possession to you. Something pretty to show off at galas and fundraisers. I stepped closer. You have no idea what love is, Serafina. You wouldn't recognize it if it slapped you in your lying face. She recoiled as if I'd struck her. Good. Let her feel a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. A new voice interrupted our confrontation. Get away from her, old man. I turned to see Jackson lounging in the doorway, all cocky bravado in his workout gear. My lip curled in disgust. Well, if it isn't the boy toy himself, I sneered. Tell me, Jackson, does it make you feel like a big man to fuck another man's wife? Jackson's face flushed with anger. He took a menacing step forward. Watch your mouth. Sarah's twice the woman you deserve. Hell, I'm twice the man you'll ever be. I laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Is that so? And I suppose you think you can give her the life she's accustomed to? The penthouse, the designer clothes, the vacations in the south of France? Uncertainty flickered in Jackson's eyes. Serafina laid a hand on his arm, her gaze hard as she faced me. We don't need your money, Riker, she declared. We'll make our own way. I smiled, cold and triumphant. I'm afraid that's where you're wrong, my dear. You see, I've already set certain things in motion. By this time tomorrow, you won't have a penny to your name. Your precious reputation will be in tatters. And as for your lover boys, well, let's just say their futures are looking rather bleak. Fear bloomed on Serafina's face. You're bluffing. You can't do that. Can't I? I reached into my pocket, withdrawing a small syringe. I think you'll find there's very little I can't do. Serafina's eyes widened in recognition. She knew all too well what I was capable of in the operating room. The thought that those same skilled hands could bring harm must have never occurred to her. Riker, she whispered, backing away. What are you doing? I advanced slowly, savoring her fear. Insurance, my love. A little cocktail of my own design. You'll feel the effects soon enough. Jackson lunged forward, but I was faster. The needle found Serafina's arm, plunging home before either of them could react. She gasped, more in shock than pain. What did you do to her? Jackson demanded, cradling Serafina as she swayed on her feet. I pocketed the empty syringe, my smile never wavering. Nothing she didn't bring on herself. I'd say you have bigger problems to worry about, Mr. Graves. I hear the police take a dim view of illegal steroid rings. The color drained from Jackson's face. How did you? I have my ways. I cut him off. Now, I suggest you both leave. Your presence is no longer welcome in my home. As they stumbled out, Serafina leaning heavily on Jackson, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The game had begun, and I intended to savor every moment of their downfall. I picked up my phone, dialing Mallory's number. It's done, I said when she answered. Time for phase 2. Mallory's laugh was rich with anticipation. Oh, Riker, this is going to be so much fun. I ended the call, pouring myself a celebratory scotch. As I sipped the amber liquid, I gazed out at the Pacific. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, implacable and eternal, like my revenge. I sat in my study, fingers steepled as I watched the chaos unfold on multiple screens before me. Serafina's world was crumbling, piece by carefully orchestrated piece. My phone buzzed. Mallory. It's done, she said without preamble. All of Serafina's accounts are frozen. She won't be able to withdraw so much as a penny. I allowed myself a small smile. Excellent work, Mallory. And the family? I just got off the phone with her father. Let's just say he's less than pleased with his darling daughter's extracurricular activities. A ping from my laptop drew my attention, another piece falling into place. Riker. Mallory's voice held a note of curiosity. What was that? That, my dear, was the sound of Alistair Thorne's career imploding. I clicked through the incoming emails, savoring each panicked message. It seems someone leaked some rather damning information about his research methods to the medical board. Mallory's laugh was rich with satisfaction. You really don't do anything by halves, do you? When have you ever known me to? I leaned back in my chair, surveying my handiwork. How are things progressing with Jackson? Our friends at the DEA were very interested in the tip about his steroid operation. They're planning a raid as we speak. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Good. Keep me updated. As I ended the call, a flurry of motion on one of the screens caught my eye. Serafina, stumbling out of a high-end boutique, her face a mask of confusion and anger. I turned up the volume on the hidden microphone. "What do you mean my card was declined?" she shrieked at the helpless sales clerk. "There must be some mistake. Do you know who I am?" The clerk's voice was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cade, but the transaction won't go through. Perhaps you have another form of payment?" Serafina fumbled in her purse, growing more frantic by the second. "This is impossible. I just used this card yesterday." I chuckled, savoring her distress. Let her feel a fraction of the helplessness I'd experienced. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Serafina herself. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Yes, dear." "Riker, what the hell is going on?" she demanded. "None of my cards are working. I can't access any of our accounts." I feigned concern. "How strange. Have you called the bank?" "Of course I called the bank," she snapped. "They said the accounts are frozen pending an investigation." "Riker, what have you done?" I dropped the act, my voice turning cold. "I've merely protected what's mine, Serafina. Did you really think I'd let you walk away with half of everything after what you've done?" Her gasp was sharp and satisfying. "You can't do this. I'll fight you." "Oh, you'll what?" I cut her off. "Take me to court? With what money? What lawyer would represent you once they learn of your indiscretions?" Serafina's voice trembled with a mixture of rage and fear. "My family will help me." "They?" "Ah, yes, about that." I savored the moment. "I had a rather illuminating conversation with your father earlier. It seems he's not too keen on having an adulteress for a daughter. Don't expect any help from that quarter." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When Serafina spoke again, her voice was small, defeated. "What do you want from me, Riker?" I leaned forward, my voice a low growl. "I want you to suffer, Serafina. I want you to feel the pain and humiliation you've caused me. And this is only the beginning." I ended the call, tossing the phone aside. A notification popped up on my laptop breaking news about a prominent surgeon under investigation for ethical violations. I clicked the link, a cruel smile playing on my lips as I read about Alastair Thorne's fall from grace. Another screen showed Jackson being led away in handcuffs, his gym raided by DEA agents. The expression of shock and betrayal on his face was almost comical. A soft knock at the door interrupted my reverie. "Come in," I called. Mallory entered, a thick file tucked under her arm. Her eyes gleamed with a mixture of admiration and something darker as she took in the array of screens. "I have the latest reports," she said, laying the file on my desk. "It's even better than we hoped. Serafina's reputation is in tatters. The art world is already distancing itself from her." I nodded, pleased. "And the neurotoxin?" Mallory's smile was predatory. "Working exactly as you predicted. She's experiencing the first symptoms, though she doesn't realize it yet. The tremors, the confusion, she thinks it's just stress." I stood, moving to the window that overlooked the Pacific. The waves crashed relentlessly against the cliffs below, much like my own determination. "You've done well, Mallory," I said without turning. "I couldn't have orchestrated this without you." I heard her intake of breath, felt her move closer. "Riker, I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Don't. This is business, nothing more." Mallory's disappointment was palpable, but she recovered quickly. "Of course. What's our next move?" I turned back to face her, my expression resolute. "We keep pushing. I want Serafina stripped of everything: her money, her reputation, her very sense of self. And as for Alastair and Jackson, they'll wish they'd never laid eyes on my wife." Mallory nodded, her own expression hardening. "Consider it done." As she left, I returned to my screens, watching the destruction I'd wrought. Some might call it cruel, excessive, but they hadn't experienced the betrayal, the humiliation. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. Days passed, each one bringing new victories in my campaign against Serafina and her lovers. I savored each moment, each piece of news that showed their worlds crumbling. I sat in my study, a glass of scotch in hand, when my phone buzzed. "Mallory, you'll want to see this," she said without preamble. "Turn on the news." I obliged, switching one of my monitors to a local news channel. The anchor's voice filled the room. In a shocking turn of events, renowned surgeon Dr. Alastair Thorne has been stripped of his medical license following allegations of unethical practices and data falsification. Dr. Thorne, who was previously celebrated for his groundbreaking research in neurosurgery, now faces potential criminal charges. I smiled, raising my glass in a mock toast to Alastair's image on the screen. "Cheers, old friend. How the mighty have fallen." Mallory's voice crackled through the phone. "That's not all. Check your email." I switched tabs, opening a new message from an anonymous sender. Inside was a video file. I clicked play, watching as Jackson Graves, looking haggard and desperate, spoke directly to the camera. "Riker," he began, his voice rough. "I know you're behind this. The arrest, the charges, all of it. I'm begging you, man. My family's being torn apart. My old man's heart can't take this stress. Please, just tell me what you want. I'll do anything." I leaned back, considering. "Interesting. What do you think, Mallory? Should we throw the boy a bone?" "Why bother?" she scoffed. "He made his bed. Let him lie in it." I nodded, a plan forming. Perhaps. But he might still be useful. Have our contacts in the DA's office offer him a deal. In exchange for leniency, he gives us everything he knows about Serafina's plans, her contacts, anything that could be of use. You think he'll go for it? I chuckled darkly. Oh, I'm counting on it. A man like Jackson, faced with real consequences, he'll sing like a canary. As if on cue, my personal phone lit up. Serafina. I put it on speaker. "Riker." Her voice was strained, desperate. "Please, we need to talk. I don't feel well. Something's wrong." I feigned concern. "What do you mean, dear? Are you ill?" "I don't know," she said, frustration evident. "My hands keep shaking. I'm forgetting things. At first I thought it was stress, but, Riker, I'm scared." I allowed a hint of worry to creep into my tone. "That does sound serious. Perhaps you should see a doctor." Serafina's laugh was bitter. "With what money? You've taken everything." Now, I chided gently. "I'm not a monster. I'll have my personal physician stop by to check on you. We may be separating, but I still care about your well-being." The lie rolled off my tongue smoothly. In truth, I reveled in her fear, her confusion. The neurotoxin was working precisely as designed. After ending the call, I turned back to Mallory. "Send Dr. Evans to examine Serafina. Make sure he knows to be thorough, but ultimately inconclusive. I want her paranoia to grow." Mallory's voice held a note of admiration. "You really have thought of everything, haven't you?" "One must be thorough in these matters," I replied. "Now, what's our next move?" We spent the next hour planning, refining our strategy. By the time Mallory left, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as I'd envisioned. I moved to the large windows overlooking the Pacific, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and red. The beauty of the scene contrasted sharply with the darkness of my thoughts. A knock at the door interrupted my reverie. "Come in," I called, not turning from the view. Footsteps approached, then stopped. "Dr. Cade? I have the latest test results you requested." I recognized the voice of Dr. Evans, my personal physician and longtime confidant. Turning, I gestured for him to continue. Evans cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, about Mrs. Cade's condition, are you sure about this course of action? The symptoms you described, they're consistent with—" I cut him off with a sharp gesture. "I'm well aware of what they're consistent with, doctor. Your job is to examine and report, nothing more. Is that clear?" He nodded, chastened. "Of course, sir. I apologize. It's just, well, it's a cruel way to—" "Cruel?" I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "You have no idea what cruelty is, Evans. What Serafina did to me, to our marriage, that was cruelty. This is justice." Evans looked like he wanted to argue further, but thought better of it. Smart man. As you say, sir, he murmured, handing over a thick file. Here are the full results of Mrs. Cade's examination. As requested, I've left the diagnosis open to interpretation. I took the file, nodding in dismissal. Thank you, doctor. That will be all. As Evans left, I returned to my desk, opening the file. Page after page of test results, all showing the slow, inexorable breakdown of Serafina's nervous system. To most, it would look like the early stages of a degenerative disease. Only I knew the truth. I closed the file, a cold smile playing on my lips. Let Serafina worry. Let her fear grow. Soon, she would be entirely dependent on my good graces, just as I had once foolishly depended on her love. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. Intrigued, I opened it. I know what you're doing. To Serafina, to Alistair. It has to stop. Meet me at the old boathouse tonight at midnight. Come alone, or I go public with everything. I stared at the message, a mixture of anger and curiosity coursing through me. Who could possibly know the full extent of my plans? And more importantly, who would dare to threaten me? For a moment, I considered ignoring the message. But the potential risk was too great. I had come too far, sacrificed too much, to let some unknown variable derail my carefully laid plans. Decision made. I reached for my coat. Whoever this mysterious messenger was, they were about to learn a harsh lesson about crossing Riker Cade. As I left my study, I cast one last glance at the screens showing the ruins of Serafina's life. Nothing and no one would stand in the way of my revenge. The game was far from over. The old boathouse loomed before me, a dilapidated structure silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Waves lapped gently against the shore, the rhythmic sound a stark contrast to the tension thrumming through my body. I checked my watch. 11:58 p.m. Whoever had sent that message would be here soon. The creak of weathered boards announced someone's approach. I turned, my hand instinctively moving to the small of my back where I'd concealed a weapon. Better safe than sorry. A figure emerged from the shadows, and I felt my breath catch. Mallory. You? I said, disbelief coloring my tone. You sent that message? Mallory stepped closer, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. I did. Riker, we need to talk. I narrowed my eyes, suspicion replacing surprise. About what, exactly? I thought we were on the same page here, Mallory. She laughed, the sound tinged with hysteria. The same page? Riker, you have no idea. I've been by your side through all of this, helping you destroy Serafina, Alistair, Jackson. Do you know why? I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. Mallory took another step forward, her eyes shining with an intensity that bordered on madness. Because I love you, Riker. I have for years. I thought if I helped you get rid of Serafina, you'd finally see me. Really see me. The confession hung in the air between us. I felt a flash of anger, quickly suppressed. This was an unexpected complication, but one I could handle. Mallory, I began, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. I'm flattered, truly. But you must understand, my focus right now is on your revenge, I know. She cut me off, bitterness creeping into her tone. It's all you care about. But don't you see? We could be so good together. Once this is all over, we could. I held up a hand, stopping her. There is no we, Mallory. There never has been. You've been an invaluable asset in this, and I'm grateful. But that's all this is. Business. Mallory's face contorted with hurt, quickly replaced by anger. Business? Is that all I am to you? After everything I've done? She reached into her purse, pulling out a thick folder. I've kept records, Riker. Every illegal move, every shady deal. If I can't have you, I'll bring this whole thing crashing down around your ears. I stared at her, my mind racing. This was an unforeseen development, but not an insurmountable one. I'd come too far to let Mallory's misplaced affections derail everything. Think carefully about what you're doing, Mallory, I said. You're not the only one with incriminating information. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I smiled, cold and triumphant. Did you really think I wouldn't have a contingency plan? I have evidence of your own illegal activities, Mallory. The bribes, the planted evidence, the threats. If I go down, you're coming with me. Mallory's face paled, the folder in her hands trembling slightly. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled out my phone, quickly pulling up a series of damning emails and photos. Care to take that chance? For a long moment, we stood in tense silence, the only sound the lapping of waves against the shore. Then, slowly, Mallory lowered the folder. What do you want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped closer, my voice soft but implacable. I want you to remember your place, Mallory. You're a valuable asset, nothing more. Continue to be useful, and we'll both profit from this venture. Mallory's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and resignation. She took a deep breath, visibly composing herself. Fine, she said, her voice tight. What's our next move? I smiled, pleased to see her falling back in line. We continue as planned. Serafina's downfall is nearly complete, but there's still work to be done. Mallory nodded, her professional mask slipping back into place. What about Alistair? He's been making noise about going public with some supposed evidence against you. I waved a dismissive hand. Let him try. We've discredited him thoroughly. No one will believe a word he says. We spent the next hour refining our strategy, the earlier confrontation fading into the background. As we prepared to leave, Mallory paused. Riker, she said, her voice hesitant, I know you said this is just business, but I hope you know how much I admire you. Your strength, your determination. It's inspiring. I regarded her for a moment, then nodded. Your dedication is appreciated, Mallory. Now, let's finish what we started. As we walked back to our cars, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The game was far from over, but victory was within reach. Serafina, Alistair, Jackson, they would all pay for their betrayal, and I would watch with satisfaction as their worlds burned. I sat in my study, surrounded by screens displaying the fruits of my labor. Serafina's face stared back at me from a news article, her once radiant beauty marred by stress and fear. The headline screamed, Prominent art curator embroiled in scandal. A knock at the door interrupted my reverie. Come in, I called, not taking my eyes off the screens. Alistair Thorne shuffled in, a shadow of his former self. Gone was the cocky surgeon who had dared to touch my wife. In his place stood a broken man, desperation etched into every line of his face. Riker, he began, his voice hoarse. I need your help. I turned to face him, my expression neutral. And why would I help you, Alistair? After everything you've done? He flinched at my words but pressed on. Because I have information. About Serafina. Things you don't know. My interest piqued despite myself. Go on. Alistair took a deep breath. It wasn't just an affair. Serafina. She was using me. Using both of us, really. She wanted access to your research, your breakthroughs. She was planning to steal it all, pass it off as our joint work. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I had known of Serafina's betrayal, but this cut deeper than I had imagined. Prove it, I demanded, my voice cold. Alistair reached into his jacket, pulling out a USB drive. It's all here. Emails, recordings, everything. I kept it as insurance, but, well, desperate times and all that. I took the drive, turning it over in my hands. And what do you want in exchange for this, Alistair? He swallowed hard. Protection. You've destroyed me, Riker. My career, my reputation, it's all gone. I just want to walk away from this mess. Start over somewhere new. I considered his words, weighing the potential benefits against the satisfaction of watching him suffer further. Finally, I nodded. Very well. I'll look into this information. If it proves useful, I'll consider your request. Relief washed over Alistair's face. Thank you, Riker. I held up a hand, cutting him off. Don't thank me yet. And Alistair? If I find out you're lying to me, what I've done to you so far will seem like a gentle caress compared to what will follow. Understood? He nodded frantically, backing towards the door. Understood. I swear, it's all true. As Alistair left, I plugged the USB drive into my computer. File after file popped up, each more damning than the last. Serafina's voice, cold and calculating, discussing plans to steal my work. Emails outlining their strategy. It was all there, laid bare in black and white. My phone buzzed. Mallory, what is it? I answered, my voice tight with barely suppressed rage. It's done, she replied. The press has the story about Serafina's corporate espionage. It's going to break within the hour. I smiled, cold and triumphant. Excellent. And the other matter? Taken care of. Jackson's family has been informed of his activities. They're not taking it well. Good, I said, satisfaction coursing through me. Keep me updated. As I ended the call, I turned back to the screens. Serafina's face stared back at me, frozen in a moment of happier times. I reached out, touching the image of her cheek. Oh, Serafina, I murmured. You really should have known better than to cross me. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. I watched with grim satisfaction as Serafina's world imploded spectacularly. News channels blared with reports of her betrayal, her attempts at corporate espionage. The art world, once her domain, turned its back on her with breathtaking speed. My phone rang constantly, reporters seeking comment, former colleagues expressing shock and dismay. I ignored them all, focused solely on the destruction I had wrought. As night fell, I poured myself a glass of scotch, savoring the burn as I contemplated my next move. Serafina was ruined, her reputation in tatters. Alistair was a broken man, clinging to the faint hope of redemption. Jackson? Well, Jackson was learning the hard way that actions had consequences. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Mallory entered, her face flushed with excitement. Riker, she breathed. You need to see this. She handed me her tablet, already cued to a live news broadcast. Serafina stood before a crowd of reporters, her once impeccable appearance now disheveled and frantic. I don't know what's happening to me, she stammered, her hands visibly shaking. These accusations, they're not true. I would never. I can't. Her words trailed off as she swayed on her feet. The reporters surged forward, shouting questions, as Serafina's eyes rolled back in her head. She collapsed on camera, her body convulsing. I watched, my expression impassive, as paramedics rushed to her aid. Mallory turned to me, her eyes wide. Did you know this would happen? She asked, a note of awe in her voice. I set down the tablet, taking a sip of my scotch. Let's just say I'm not surprised. The human body can only take so much stress, after all. Mallory's gaze sharpened. Riker, what did you do? I met her eyes, my voice cold. What was necessary? Nothing more, nothing less. She nodded slowly, a mixture of fear and admiration on her face. What now? I turned back to the windows, gazing out at the night sky. Now, we wait. The game isn't over yet, Mallory. Not by a long shot. As I stood there, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. Serafina's collapse was just another step in my grand design. Soon, very soon, she would understand the true meaning of suffering, and I would be there to watch every moment of it. The pounding on my front door echoed through the mansion, jarring me from my contemplation. I glanced at the security feed, a cold smile playing on my lips as I recognized the figure on my doorstep. Jackson Graves, looking wild-eyed and desperate. I buzzed him in, moving to the foyer to greet my unexpected guest. Jackson burst through the door, his normally sculpted physique now haggard and unkempt. You bastard, he snarled, lunging towards me. You've ruined everything. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, watching dispassionately as he stumbled. Good evening to you too, Jackson. To what do I owe this pleasure? Jackson whirled to face me, his eyes blazing with hate. Don't play dumb with me, Cade. I know you're behind all of this. The arrests, my family finding out, Serafina. His voice broke on her name, and I felt a surge of disgust. Even now, after everything, he still cared for her. And what if I am? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. What do you plan to do about it? With a roar of rage, Jackson charged at me again. This time, I was ready. I ducked under his wild swing, using his momentum to send him crashing into a nearby table. The sound of shattering glass filled the air. Is this really how you want to play this, Jackson? I taunted, circling him as he struggled to his feet. Haven't you learned by now that you're out of your league? Jackson spat blood, his eyes never leaving mine. Shut up. You think you're so smart, so above it all. But you're just a sad, pathetic old man who couldn't keep his wife satisfied. The words were meant to hurt, to provoke. But I felt nothing but cold amusement. Is that what you tell yourself, Jackson? That you were satisfying her? You were nothing but a toy, a distraction. And now? Now you're not even that. With a cry of inarticulate rage, Jackson rushed me again. This time, I didn't dodge. I met his charge head-on, years of pent-up anger and betrayal fueling my movements. We crashed through the study door, grappling and trading blows. Jackson's youth and strength were formidable, but I had years of calculated precision on my side. Every move I made was designed to inflict maximum damage. As we fought, scattering papers and appending furniture, I caught sight of my journal on the desk, the record of my revenge, my grand design. In that moment of distraction, Jackson landed a solid punch to my jaw, sending me reeling. Not so tough now, are you? He panted, advancing on me. I'm going to enjoy this. I tasted blood in my mouth, but I smiled. Oh, Jackson, you really should have stayed in your lane. In one fluid motion, I reached into my pocket and withdrew a small syringe. Before Jackson could react, I plunged it into his thigh, depressing the plunger. His eyes widened in shock and fear. What did you do? I stepped back, watching as the paralytic agent took effect. Jackson's movements became sluggish, his limbs refusing to obey his commands. Within moments, he collapsed to the floor, unable to move but fully conscious. I crouched beside him, my voice low and triumphant. You see, Jackson, this is the difference between us. You act on impulse, on emotion. I plan. I prepare. And I always come out on top. Fear bloomed in Jackson's eyes as he realized the full extent of his predicament. I stood, straightening my clothes and wiping blood from my lip. Now then, I continued, moving to my desk and picking up my phone, I believe it's time to call the authorities. Breaking and entering. Assault. My, Jackson. You've been a busy boy tonight. As I dialed, I kept my eyes locked on Jackson's paralyzed form. You know, I should thank you. You've given me the perfect opportunity to tie up this loose end. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you ever see the outside of a prison cell again. The operator answered, and I affected a tone of panic. Yes, hello? I need help. There's an intruder in my home. He attacked me. Please, send someone quickly. As I gave them the details, I watched the despair grow in Jackson's eyes. He had come here seeking revenge, thinking he could best me. Instead, he had walked right into my trap. I ended the call, moving to pour myself a drink. The sirens were already audible in the distance. You know, Jackson, I mused, sipping my scotch. In a way, I should be grateful to you and Serafina. You showed me the truth about love, about trust. It's all an illusion, a weakness to be exploited. Thanks to you, I'll never make that mistake again. The front door burst open, police flooding into the house. As they secured Jackson and began questioning me, I played the part of the shocked victim perfectly. Years of maintaining a facade in high-stress surgeries had prepared me well for this moment. As Jackson was carried out on a stretcher, still paralyzed, our eyes met one last time. I saw the moment he realized the full extent of his defeat, the utter hopelessness of his situation, and I smiled. The air in my mansion was thick with the scent of champagne as the echoes of my victory celebration reverberated through the grand halls. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of scotch in hand, surveying the crowd of sycophants and well-wishers who had gathered to bask in my triumph. My revenge was complete. Serafina had been betrayed. Alistair was ruined, and Jackson was in prison. I had won, but the taste of victory was unexpectedly bitter on my tongue. Mallory appeared at my elbow, her eyes shining with a mixture of admiration and something darker. Quite the turnout, Riker. You must be pleased. I took a sip of my scotch, my voice cool. Pleased? Yes, I suppose that's one word for it. As I raised my glass to toast my success, a commotion near the entrance drew my attention. I turned, my eyes widening in shock as I saw Serafina stumbling through the crowd. She looked nothing like the polished woman I had married, her hair disheveled, her eyes wild with a mixture of fear and determination. But it wasn't her appearance that made my blood run cold. It was the gun clutched in her trembling hand. "Serafina," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the surge of adrenaline coursing through me. "What are you doing here?" Her laugh was high and brittle, bordering on hysteria. "What am I doing here?" "Oh, Riker. Always so controlled, so above it all. Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? The neurotoxin, the systematic destruction of my life. It was all you, wasn't it?" I set down my glass, my mind racing. How had she gotten past security? And more importantly, where had she gotten a gun? "You're unwell, Serafina," I said, taking a step towards her. "Let me call someone to help you." "Don't come any closer," she shrieked, the gun wavering in her grip. "I'm not here for your help. I'm here to end this, once and for all." From the corner of my eye, I saw Mallory inching towards Serafina, her face a mask of determination. I gave her a subtle shake of my head. The last thing I needed was for her misplaced loyalty to get her killed. "Think about what you're doing," I said, my voice low and steady. "You're surrounded by witnesses. There's no way out of this for you." Serafina's smile was a ghastly thing, a rictus of pain and madness. "Oh, I'm well aware of that, darling, but I'm not leaving here alone." Before I could react, a figure emerged from the crowd behind Serafina. My eyes widened in disbelief as I recognized Alistair Thorne, the man whose career and life I had systematically destroyed. "Hello, Riker," Alistair said, his voice dripping with malice. "Surprised to see me?" I felt a flicker of something I hadn't experienced in years. Fear. "Alistair," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I thought you'd be halfway across the world by now." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "And miss this? Your moment of triumph? Never." I watched as he placed a steadying hand on Serafina's shoulder, whispering something in her ear. She nodded, her grip on the gun tightening. "You took everything from us, Riker," Alistair continued. "Our lives, our reputations, our future. But you forgot one crucial thing." "And what's that?" I asked, my eyes darting between them, looking for an opening, a way to turn this situation to my advantage. Alistair's smile was cold and triumphant. "You can't kill what's already dead. We have nothing left to lose." Time seemed to slow as Serafina raised the gun, her aim steadying as she pointed it directly at my chest. I saw her finger tighten on the trigger, heard the deafening crack of the gunshot. Pain exploded through me as the bullet found its mark. I staggered backward, dimly aware of screams erupting around me, of Mallory's voice shouting my name. As I collapsed to the floor, my life's blood staining the expensive carpet, I looked up at Serafina and Alistair. Their faces, once so familiar, now seemed like masks of strangers, cold, implacable, victorious. My vision began to darken at the edges, the sounds around me fading to a dull roar. As consciousness slipped away, my last thought was of the bitter irony. I, Riker Cade, the master manipulator, the architect of ruin, had been outplayed at my own game. The Emperor of Ashes, felled by his own hubris. Everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was blinking against harsh fluorescent lights. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled my nostrils, and the steady beep of medical equipment reached my ears. I was in a hospital. "He's awake," I heard Mallory's voice, strained with worry and lack of sleep. A doctor's face swam into view. "Dr. Cade, can you hear me? You're in the hospital. You've been shot, but you're stable now." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Mallory held a cup of water to my lips, her hand trembling slightly. As my faculties returned, the memories came flooding back. Serafina, Alistair, the gun. My carefully orchestrated victory celebration turned into a nightmare. What happened? I managed to croak out. Mallory's face was a mixture of relief and concern. "After you were shot, I managed to get you out of there. called for help. It was touch and go for a while, but you pulled through. I nodded, wincing at the pain that shot through me. Serafina? Alistair? In custody, Mallory replied, her voice hard. They didn't get far. As I lay there, hovering between life and death, a strange clarity washed over me. The pain was more than just physical. It was the realization that my quest for revenge had led me to the brink of my own destruction. Days passed in a haze of pain medication and fitful sleep. When I was finally lucid enough, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I want to see Serafina, I told Mallory. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Riker, she tried to kill you. Are you sure about this? I nodded, my resolve firm. I'm sure. And I'm not pressing charges. Mallory's eyes widened in disbelief. What? After everything she's done? The cycle has to end, Mallory, I said softly. Revenge, it's a poison. I see that now. When Serafina was brought to my hospital room, the woman who entered was a shadow of her former self. Gone was the vibrant, confident art curator I had married. In her place stood a broken, trembling figure, her eyes sunken and haunted. Riker, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I don't understand. Why am I here? I studied her for a long moment before speaking. I'm offering you a choice, Serafina. A way out. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. What kind of choice? I have the antidote to the neurotoxin, I said, watching her face carefully. I'm willing to give it to you, to end this madness once and for all. Serafina's legs gave out, and she sank into the chair beside my bed. Why? She asked, tears welling in her eyes. Why now, after everything? I sighed, feeling the weight of my actions pressing down on me. Because this has to end. The revenge, the destruction, it's brought nothing but misery. To all of us. Over the next few weeks, as I recovered and Serafina received treatment, we began the slow, painful process of untangling the web of destruction we had woven. I made the decision to stop my revenge entirely, instead channeling my energy into research and charity work. The road to redemption was long and difficult. I sought therapy, forcing myself to confront the demons I had long buried beneath my stoic exterior. Slowly, painfully, I began to heal not just physically, but emotionally. Months later, I stood outside Serafina's new apartment. She had recovered, both physically and emotionally, and was starting anew. As she opened the door, we shared a moment of silence, the weight of our shared past hanging in the air. Thank you, she said softly, for giving me another chance. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. We both needed it, I think. As I walked away from her door, I felt lighter than I had in years. The man who had once been the Emperor of Ashes, ruling over a kingdom of destruction, was gone. In his place stood someone new, someone determined to build rather than destroy. The sun was setting over the Pacific as I returned to my mansion. I paused at the entrance, taking in the golden hue cast over the property. This place, once a fortress of isolation and bitterness, now felt different. It was no longer a monument to my revenge, but a sanctuary where I could find peace. As I stepped inside, I knew that the hardest part of my journey still lay ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt hope. The shadows of betrayal that had consumed me for so long were finally beginning to fade, giving way to the promise of a new dawn. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.